So yeah, a lot of things that tie people to places they love or people they love. That's what's been really cool about it is there's almost always a story with the commission and
Hmm.
a person saying like, I've always wanted this, or I want to say to this person, I treasure you, or I treasure this space where this thing happened, or I treasure this memory of home. And that's what's been really fun is hearing those stories.
Hey everyone, this is Amber Key, and you're listening to a Bright Idea podcast, a show where I sit down with entrepreneurs to hear about the aha moment that launched their businesses. On today's show, we're joined by watercolor artist Ann W. Thomas. I met Ann at a coffee shop in Hyattsville, Maryland. She was enjoying a coffee and a chat with a friend when I approached her to ask if she'd be willing to be in a promo I was helping to shoot with my job. She agreed, and while waiting for her to sign our media release forms, we got to talking about what we did for a living. A big smile came across her face when I asked her what she did for a living, and she told me that she had recently become an artist. Ann Thomas had an unlikely path to the art studio. After graduating from the University of Maryland in 2003 with a degree in history, she began a career working on Capitol Hill. Later, she transitioned to the Commerce Department where she got to travel the world and work with cabinet members. She finished her time there as deputy press secretary and transitioned to private sector work at a leading global public relations firm in 2007. Marriage, 4 babies, and part-time PR work followed. When her fourth baby headed off to full-time school in 2022, Anne, a lifelong secret artist with an entrepreneurial bent, saw an opening for making her dreams of focusing on artwork a reality. Simultaneously, she was realizing e-commerce had changed her life and shopping habits. She saw the opportunity that social media provided for artists and jumped feet first into the creative community of female entrepreneurs and founders that were democratizing fashion, home goods, art, and more. I'm excited to share Anne's story today to encourage my listeners that it's never too late. This is a story of pivot, faith, and patience for the moment it's time to make the leap. Enjoy.
So I'm really excited, first of all, to have you on the show because we met a few weeks ago at a coffee shop randomly. I was there for work and I we were shooting a promo for my day job, and I came up to you and I was like, "Can you be in this promo?" And then we got to talking, and I think one thing that I've thought about since meeting you was like how important it is to just talk to people out in public because you never know who you're going to meet and how you're going to interact with people, but also like the stories that you're going to get from the people that you talk to. So I'm really excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Amber. I am so excited to be here.
Yeah. So I want you to kind of give us a little bit of your background, who you are, and kind of how you got into becoming an artist or just art in general.
Yeah, so this is like my second career, my second life, or maybe third. But I am from Baltimore County, and I went to the University of Maryland. And I majored in government and politics, and I started working on Capitol Hill right after school. And I always was an artist. I was always drawing. I took drawing in high school, and I took drawing one and drawing two at University of Maryland. But for many reasons, I was like, okay, I'm not going to be an art major. I'm going to do something like sensible, something like parent approved, and be a history major. And I said government and politics. I had like they don't have minors there, but an emphasis in government and politics. So anyways, I did this like responsible thing, and or what I felt was like, I don't know, a path that would probably be easier to take. Um and I came right here to Capitol Hill right after graduation, and I started my life here, and I met my husband. I worked at the Commerce Department. I had a career in public relations. Um, and then I began having my 4 kids. So that has been like that part of my life. But um, I I always was someone who was drawing as a kid. You would have found like all the back of my notebooks totally full, and or like if my brother and sister didn't fill a notebook, they're 10 and 12 years older than me. I would like commandeer them and fill them all up with drawings. And it's just like joyful. It's just what gave me joy.
Yeah.
And as I got older, I was like, gosh, if I could think about what do I really want to do? Like, what could I really spend my time doing that would be totally joyful?
Mhm.
I just kept coming back to the same answer, and it was going back to my artwork.
How did your parents encourage you to start drawing, or was it just something that you kind of naturally gravitated towards?
Yeah, no, there was no encouragement. It was just what I did naturally.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say, as a kid, I sort of was born. My parents had two kids, 2 years apart, and then like 10 years later, I came along. So life was established, things were in full swing. And I was like riding around in the car to their high school games and things like that, and there weren't any kids in our neighborhood. It was like a neighborhood that had been built in like the 60s and 70s, and so a lot of my brother and sister were even at the tail end of the kids. There just weren't a lot of kids there, so
Mhm.
I just spent a lot of time drawing. It's something you can do like almost for free, if you have paper or even like the backs of like paper that already exists for some
Yeah.
other purpose, and a pencil, you have something to do. And yeah, aside from my class in high school, it's not like I was like going to art classes as a kid,
Mhm.
but I just always was doing it.
Yeah. So I was reading some of your blog posts before. And first of all, that. I love how you're sharing your story online and kind of taking that you've mentioned that you had like two or three lives prior to getting back into art. And one thing that I really loved was when you talked about going to college and how you didn't even think about like being an art major per se because your parents were both in the science field. I just wanted to know, did you like why didn't you decide to study art, or was that even a thought in your mind when you were applying to school?
Yeah, good question. I just didn't know a path ahead, you know?
Yeah.
Didn't know the way forward. And I think right now is a very exciting time to be a creative person. And like I have a very artistic daughter. Both my daughters are actually very artistic, and I'm always saying to them, like if there's a cover of a notebook, that an artist design, I'm like, this thing that you take for granted, this began life with an artist in a studio making like a watercolor painting, and then they uploaded it to Illustrator, and then that's how this came to be. Or
Mhm.
like a shirt they like or something, I'm like, this all began with an artist. So I'm trying to like show them that there is a way forward. But yeah, I
Yeah.
sort of didn't consider it. I almost became an art history major. I even went to the building to change my major, and like I didn't do it. I chickened.
Yeah.
But like, there's like a right time for everything, I think. And like now's the right time, I think, for me. So
No, I love that. And I love that you're teaching your daughters the business of art. I feel like also, like I grew up going to art school in middle school and high school. I think I had mentioned to you, and I went to like a magnet school where the first part of our day was academics, and then the second half of our day was all of our major dedicated to 8 different types of mediums and studios. It was so much fun. But one thing that they don't teach you in art school is how you can make it a lucrative business or how you can create a career out of it. When you think of an artist, you think of like you have to be in a museum, or there's like this idea that you're like a starving artist just trying to make it.
right.
But as you
Yeah.
had mentioned with the notebooks that your daughters pick up, it's like you could create a design and put it in Illustrator and create journals, and this is like passive, and you're like, and you can put it all over the internet and people can buy your stuff repeatedly. So I really do like that you're teaching them that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, like we definitely went to art museums and things like that growing up. My parents like absolutely, exposed us to that. But the thought of going into an art gallery where
Yeah.
someone might expect you to pay like thousands of dollars was very intimidating. I have very wonderful, very frugal parents. And we actually had art on our walls from my grandfather, who was a great artist, and I have some of his art on the walls in my house. But um, just that, like the thought of like going into a gallery, like felt very terrifying or scary. So there was that exposure, but limited and in different ways. So
So, so it does run in your family. You had a grandfather who was an artist.
well,
Was he
you
a
know what? I
painter?
mean, sorry, he was like he worked for like Amtrak all his life.
Yeah.
And then like his second career, his like, what do I really want to do with my retirement was art. And so yeah, it's a it's a great second life to step into. But in some ways I feel so blessed to be living right now, Amber, because when he created art, he lived in the Bronx, and he had to like go down to Manhattan with like a table and set up his art, and he was only exposed to the people walking by like on that day, which is
Mhm.
why like 50 years later we have these boxes of his artwork, because it was hard to get out, to get your art into the right hands, or how do you contact a gallery. But now we have such amazing ways, like you can put your art out through Instagram or on your own website.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And what sort of medium was he creating or
oil
using?
oil
Oh, that's awesome.
Hey guys, interrupting this episode real quick while we're on the topic of female entrepreneurs. If you haven't listened already, I want you to go back and listen to Undie Wash. Undie Wash is a female owned laundry detergent company that basically creates detergents for your panties to combat vaginal infections. Yes, we go there in this episode. I really loved this episode for a lot of reasons, but for one, it's so raw and it's so educational, and it's about a topic that oftentimes is taboo. And Shannon, who had been dealing with this recurring issue, decided that rather than just letting it be what it's going to be, she created a solution, and now she's helping thousands of women help with their own issues. And I think that it's a phenomenal episode. It's actually a fan favorite, might I add. I'm going to link to the episode in the description. I'm also going to link her website in case you want to try out some of her products. I have some people that I know that have tried her products and they love them. So after this episode, go on back to our very first episode on A Bright Idea with Shannon Thomas. You can listen to that episode everywhere podcasts are available. Back to the show.
I want to pivot a bit because you mentioned you have 4 kids, so I'm sure you are super busy. And I was reading also in your blog that you took some time from art just to raise your children, which is a huge job. I just want to know, like, what sort of the aha moment was that led you to getting back into art.
Yeah, it might have been somewhere along the line. Um, Someone asked the question, and it might not have been to me personally. It might have been listening to a podcast where someone was talking about what was that thing that you did as a child that without effort you would return to and it brought you joy. Um, and doing it is like not even working. Like doing it is just pure joy, and time evaporates, and you are just immersed in it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's drawing for me. Totally. Like without any hesitation. And so I just began to think about it more and more, and I just wasn't quite at the place in my life where I could make it happen with like the supplies and the space. There were these sort of real life constraints, time
Mhm.
and space. that we're boxed into.
Yeah, you talk a lot about God's timing,
Yeah.
and I love that. And I love reading. I loved reading in particular, like your about your faith and how that kind of like guides you through life and with raising your children, and just also empowering you to step out and take a risk on yourself by becoming an artist. I wanted to know, like, when did you think God said it was time for you to really go forward and self-proclaim, this is what I'm doing, I am an artist?
Yeah. I would say probably um probably 2 summers ago. And it's funny because I got there by having some wrong turns and some experiences where I was like, oh, this is not the time. But I mean, many years ago, so I keep all these notes in my phone um about just all the things that need to be done and all the data I need, all the whose gym day is what, and like what am I going to make for dinner? What ingredients do I have? Whatever. All these notes in my phone, and sometimes inspirational quotes, things I need to like keep me going. And many years ago, or maybe it was like, I don't know, I would say 5 to 7 years ago, I scrolled all the way to the bottom of my phone where I keep my inspirational quotes that keep me hanging on. I wrote, "Dear God, when can I paint? Like, when is that time?" And so it took a while, but it became clear to me that the time wasn't 2 summers ago when I like got all the supplies. I got like I bought because I thought I wanted to do oil paintings. Like that to me seemed like the pinnacle, like the best kind of painting. But I was like, let me start with acrylics because it's expensive to buy oil paints, and acrylics are a little bit less expensive. So I bought all these acrylic paints, and they were in my basement. And long story short is that my son and his little friend, they went to the basement and they squeezed them all out everywhere, all over each other. And I was like, oh, this is God saying this isn't the time. And then I think it was still that summer. So this is like 2022. So this is pretty recent. Someone had given my kids watercolors for Christmas, and with some good brushes. And they were doing them, and I like sat down and started playing around with them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you can actually do some stuff with watercolor. You can actually do some things. So that's a long answer to telling you that it was like probably 2022 when I was like, I'm gonna lean into this and call myself an artist and be an artist and just go for this. I'm going to start doing this. And it brought great joy.
What was one of the first pieces that you created once you had that realization?
Um, so I think it was a mouse on a sailboat wearing a sailor suit.
I love that. That
I am
reminds me of
a
yeah. No, that reminds me of Stuart Little. I actually
Yeah,
rewatched it the other day.
you know, okay.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite movies growing up. Yeah.
And how much do books come alive for younger children that have wonderful illustrations? I mean, I remember loving that as a child. And
Yeah.
eventually you get to the point where you're like, okay, I can read books without pictures, but like beautiful illustrations are just such a joy.
Yeah,
So
no, it helps move the story for sure. It helps with the imagination. And speaking of your children, like what was, where do you sort of find the time to create, and what's the feedback from your family?
yeah, that's so funny. So I now have all my kids in full day school. So my kids right now are ages 14 to age 4. And so I now have it was when the 4-year-old went off to 3-year-old preschool. I was like, oh my gosh, I moved the toy storage unit right there, and I set up this like lemonade stand table, like a plastic folding table. And I was like, I am doing this. I am going to paint. I've been like waiting for this my whole life. I'm just going to do this. And so it's funny, like my kids were kind of like, they would sometimes be surprised. They'd be like, oh, that's like good, mommy. I'm like, okay, great. And then my oldest son will like, he'll really like, he'll give me like criticism, which is great. He'll be like, you know what? Like, I don't think you've done this quite right, but like do this here. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Like I'm glad to have all these people to run things by. So they're like big fans and also critics.
Yeah.
And I think my husband is like, whoa, what's going on with my wife? But he's very supportive and and um and loves it. So
Yeah, talk about that change a little bit. Like I'm sure it's been interesting to watch him see you going from different roles and like what's that been like?
I mean, I think he's happy for me because he knows, the incredibly taxing work that parenting is. And it has high highs and low lows. You are raising these little babies, these helpless creatures, and hopefully shepherding them and raising them to good people and to good humans. And it's beautiful work, and it can be like heartbreaking, and it can be like discouraging at times, but it's really, it's living life. It's good. In the same way that art is like makes you feel alive, like parenting can make you feel alive. And anyway, so I think he's happy to see me like doing something that is different from that. But I'm also still mom all day long.
Yeah, the
Sometimes
work doesn't stop.
I get lost in my like watercolor paintings. I'm like, oh, I need to go get the groceries. It's like 2 o'clock. Like, oh, let's do this. So yeah, I find time when they're at school.
Yeah, where do you find most of your inspiration for your pieces?
Mm, good question. So all over the place. But something happened in the pandemic that I feel like really opened me up to new and different opportunities. And that is that like um we bought a house on the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland, so only like 1 hour away. And I've lived in DC for 20 years, but also kind of lived in Maryland for 20 years growing up. And also my dad passed in 2018, and my mom was moving out of the house that we grew up in. Well, it's still happening. It's a long process, but like I felt like I was connecting with a lot of things that my dad loved, because he had been in the Navy, um, and he loved the water and he loved sailing, and we loved the heron, who would come visit at the end of his pier and things like that. So I received a lot of his artwork, like his nautical prints and things like that, and hung them up all over the house. And just like I think going out into nature and reconnecting with all these things that these beautiful things of these bits of creation that were just so inspiring, like seeing ospreys and herons and blue crabs,
Mm.
was really inspiring. But I also get inspiration. I have like, catalogs come in the mail, and I'm like, oh, I love that striped umbrella. I want to paint it right now, so
Yeah.
from everywhere. And even like the children's books I read my kids, sometimes I have a mouse in a sailboat wearing a sailor suit in my mind. I'm like, I gotta get that down. I gotta paint that. So
Yeah.
everywhere, all over the place. And DC
No.
is so beautiful. The architecture, the buildings here, there's so many great plantings on the National Mall and around the Library of Congress and around the Capitol. So flowers, trees, everything.
No, I love that. And I love that you do have a house on the Chesapeake Bay. I was there a few weeks ago. My friend took me to one of her friends' homes is in St. Michael's, and we spent like a day and a half there. And we just ate crabs, and we sat by the pool, and the heron came down, and we saw like two eagles, and I was just like, God, this is like the perfect setting for like a still life of any
Yeah.
sort. And
Yeah.
I can see how that could inspire your work.
Hey everybody, back again. Here's another female-owned entrepreneur that you guys should be following right now, Jungly Vintage. I had the pleasure of interviewing Rajni Rao, the owner of Jungly Vintage, a vintage clothing brand located here in Washington, D.C. I loved this story. One thing that I really loved about Rajni's story is that Rajni is a math teacher. She's a math tutor. And during the pandemic, she was out with a friend having a picnic. We all remember those times when we were just outside, just trying to get fresh air, cooped up in our homes. And she was kind of manifesting and just daydreaming about a business idea that she had that she didn't really at the time think would ever happen, but she had a friend, shout out to those friends that make you bring your ideas into fruition, who told her, like, girl, you could start this vintage clothing brand like now. Like, you could do that now. So Rajni took her friend up on this idea and she created a pop-up shop. She started off with one in front of a flower shop here in Washington, D.C. And a few years later, Rajni is all over DC selling vintage pop-up clothing. Actually, the shirt that I'm wearing is a Jungly Vintage statement piece. So if you would love to hear a story about a clothing brand, or if you would love to hear a story about somebody taking a passion like vintage shopping or thrifting like Rajni, I would encourage everyone to go listen to this episode. Really cool story, really awesome clothing. Yeah. Again, the episode will be in the description along with Rajni's website and her Instagram handles if you would like to check her out. But yeah, back to the episode.
I will tell you, you can also be inspired. I mean, even like as far as nature goes here in DC, because I crossed the bridge that goes by RFK into Anacostia almost every
yeah.
day. And I have seen egrets, herons. I saw a spoonbill recently, which usually, I mean, I've only ever seen those in Georgia before. So I could
Yeah.
geek out about birds. So let me stop now.
No, and it's so funny because I feel that in the city in particular, we don't look at nature the same way we do when we're out there. Like I was out there with my friend and we saw all of these little grasshoppers that were like in the flowers and in the gardens and caterpillars and so many butterflies. We never see butterflies in the city. And it was just like it was so nice. I almost feel like when I'm in the city and I see a bug, it's like the biggest inconvenience of my day. I'm like, ew. But then like if I'm out on, the Chesapeake Bay and like nature, I'm like, this is where they're supposed to be. Like this is the most beautiful thing. And so it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
so glad you had that experience. There really is something um about being out in nature. It's like you can feel the energy of the earth, and it's all, it's God's creation. He's the ultimate artist. It's all
Yeah.
his beauty, and it's like it's just it's so important to take time out to admire it,
No,
and notice
absolutely.
it's there actually.
Yeah.
It's always there. We just have to look. Like the bugs, like in the city, they're there, but
Yeah.
like we have to think about like, okay, like can I find something beautiful to admire about this? You know?
Exactly. You have to dig deep within sometimes to find what's beautiful about it. No, I love that. I want to pivot a bit to talk about how art what went from just a hobby to how you're making it a business.
Mhm. Yeah, so I remember very clearly this moment in 2022. It was the end of August, and I was like, great, I'm putting my kids into school. And I am gonna sign up for this Instagram account and I'm gonna call myself an artist. So like I was like, great. And it was like a frightening moment, but I felt like I was like leaping into the unknown. So I feel like that was almost like a first step in thinking that I'm gonna do this as a job, as a thing, or like more than a hobby. But then I I got started like doing a sale for like at a Christmas fair at my kid's school, and people bought my artwork, and I was like, great, wow, okay, like maybe there's a market for this. And then I just started getting like commission after commission, and now I have commissions like all the way out till 2025.
No
So
way.
I realized there's really a market for that, which I don't know that I would have known that before, but I think taking that leap of faith and putting my artwork out into the world, like on Instagram and Facebook, and being like, guess what? I'm an artist. I can do this. And people started approaching me for artwork. And so I was like, I think I can make a business of this, but actually, and again, it was like a negative thing that happened that I hope to turn positive. I remember someone saying they wanted to see my artwork, and I was like, okay, you can see it on Instagram. And the person was like, I don't have Instagram, or like my mom's on Instagram, or like there's not everyone in the world is on Instagram, even though it might feel like it sometimes. And I was like, okay, well, I'll have to work on a website. And so then I think that was really when I was like, okay, like there's an opportunity here, and I'm gonna do this.
Yeah. And it's also like once you claimed it, that's when the doors started opening for you.
It was really a mindset shift, Amber.
Yeah. Like that's I think that's like the most empowering feeling. It's like as soon as you're like, okay, I am an artist, and then people are like, yeah, she's an artist.
Yeah.
Let's give her some work.
And it's crazy. Like sometimes I'll go someplace and someone introduces me as an artist to other people, and I'm like, yeah, that's right. All right, here I
Yeah.
am.
Oh my gosh. That is so cool. So what other you said you are commissioned all the way out until 2025. What sorts of works are you doing?
Yeah, all different things. I have a series of Oklahoma paintings I'm going to do for someone who has ties to Oklahoma. So someone who lives here in Washington, but reminding them of home. They want some reminders of home on their walls. I have a house portrait upcoming. Oh, I'm doing someone's dog this month, who passed. So pet portrait. Another person, a Californian, says, I really want a California oak. I'm painting that for her. So yeah, a lot of things that tie people to places they love or people they love. I just
Ah,
painted a church where someone got married. That was an anniversary gift from the husband to the wife. So that's what's been really cool about it is there's almost always a story with the commission and
hmm.
a person saying like, I've always wanted this, or I want to say to this person, I treasure you, or I treasure this space where this thing happened, or I treasure this memory of home. And that's what's been really fun is hearing those stories.
Yeah. How do people usually find out about you? Is it through your social media or is it word of mouth?
Yeah, so one great thing about being as old as I am is that I have been in so many communities at this point. I've lived here on the hill for 20 years, like 15 years. There was a brief stint in DuPont Circle before, but I started out on the hill, went to DuPont Circle, came back. So I've really been here for like a long time, like all of my adult life. I think we've been to like 7 nursery schools, 3 or 4 schools, um, 1 church. So yeah, I just now at this point I like know a lot of people, I think.
Yeah.
Which is why again, God's timing. Like if I had been like, I'm gonna be an art major and try to sell my art like right out of school, I wouldn't have had the communities, I don't think, that I have now because it's been so many years of knowing people. Also, it's funny, a lot of people I used to work with are like, oh, you're doing this now? That's so interesting.
Mhm.
You never knew. Um, so yeah, so also my work life people, college people, all the different communities I've been in. And I would say probably the way they have gotten in touch with me is Instagram and Facebook. Some people are reaching out in the contact form on my website.
Yeah.
Um, and also I've had the same email address for like 25 years. Really found.
Yeah. Is there a favorite piece that you've done for a customer?
Oh, that's hard. Each piece you make, is like your baby.
Hmm.
You like, oh, it's like a part of you. Um, Favorite piece, it's so hard to say. Gosh. I don't think I think picking a favorite would be like picking a favorite child.
Mm.
Um, but I have a couple pieces I love. That weren't necessarily for anyone specific, but I like am encouraged by their response. Like there's this blue crab that I painted um last year, and I don't know, it always sells out. I always have to call the art printer and say print more. I don't know. So I guess I love that one because I feel like that helped me realize, oh, like I can do this. It encouraged me along. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can't pick a favorite. I can't pick a favorite painting for a
No, that's okay. And so are you repurposing your paintings as well and reselling them?
So not my commissions. My commissions are a one and only for each person, or I haven't done that yet. But um m- work that I do that I'm just doing, I'll have the original and then I'll also get a print made. uh,
Hmm.
and that's a great way to get real work that is, at a much more affordable price point. There's going to be some people who want original work on their walls, and then there's going to be people who um don't want it right now, or would prefer, a more like an affordable option, or they're just like creating a gallery wall and they need something right now, and
Hmm.
so the it can meet all needs.
How as an artist do you decide your price points for the work
Yeah,
you
that's
do?
really interesting. I mean, you like Google, like I Google like how to price your art.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually, I'll look at how much other people are selling their artwork, and then there's also the basic like math of, I pay like for my prints. I'm paying an art printer to create prints. I'm using their best quality paper, their best quality inks, and I have their graphic graphics person like be sure that like it is exactly matching the colors. um
Hmm.
so I have some upfront costs there, so there's me making that back. And yeah, there's all kinds of things you can look at online about paying yourself, and the size, so it's based on size too, like for my commissions and things like that.
What do you think is next for you in your business?
Yeah, so I would love to create some products. um like I just did some test, like a test run for some stationery.
Mm.
But I would really love to have this nutcracker I just painted, and I would love to create some stationery because um, people are not commissioning every day of the week. There's enough business to keep going with commissions, but and people aren't buying art necessarily every single day, but things like thank you notes or journals, notebooks, you're using all the time. Um,
Yes.
so I'd love to create some products. So Christmas thank you note is my next thing that I want to do.
Yes. Is that what's up next for you?
That's what's up next. Yeah, that's one of the things I'm working on right now.
That's awesome. Can people find you at any like flea markets or local how are you a local vendor anywhere? Have you done any of that stuff yet?
I mean, I went to the Bladensburg Art Festival,
Okay.
and I'm doing like our little school fair, but definitely the best place to find me is on my online shop. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't rule it out. But I'm not like popping up at Eastern Market every Saturday or something like that. I
Yes.
On Saturday I'm like taking kids to soccer and ballet and whatever.
Exactly. You're running two
One day,
jobs.
I wouldn't rule it out, but
Yeah.
not right now.
What advice would you give to other women, moms in particular, who are in your same shoes, looking to get back into something that they've always
Mm,
loved and they just are waiting for God's time?
yeah, oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, first I would say always pray about it, and discern the right time. And my mom always had this saying about finding the right person, like um, your spouse. She always said the right person at the right time is the right person. The right person at the wrong time is the wrong person. The wrong person at the right time for you is still the wrong person. And I think it's like that with your career, what you're dreaming of. It's got to be the right thing, and it's got to also be the right time. Um, so discerning that is something to think about. But if it is like the secret prayer of your heart, keep dreaming about it, and be not afraid, make it happen. It just might be a question of timing.
I love that. This was such an awesome conversation. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you would love to share with us before I let you go?
Um, I guess I just would want to express some gratitude because there were a few people who encouraged me along. And I wouldn't, there were all these like opportunities, bright ideas, if you will, but also there were people in my life being like, you should lean into that. You're a good artist. It brings you joy. And so I just want to express gratitude to those people who encouraged me along.
I love that. Thank you so much, Anne. And where can people find you?
On my website, which is Anne with an E, ANNEW Thomas.com, or my Instagram, which my middle name, my maiden name is a little bit difficult, but I'll just say it anyway. It's at ann.woram.thomas. Woram has a W and an H. Probably if you start typing that in, it'll come up.
I'll be sure to let the listeners know.
Thank you, Anne. That's it for this week's episode of A Bright Idea. Tune in each week as we interview entrepreneurs to find out their aha moments that launched their businesses. Today's episode featured watercolor artist Anne Thomas. You can support Anne by going to her website at annwthomas.com or by following her on social media at ann.woram, WHARAM.Thomas. We're building a community of support here on A Bright Idea, so follow Anne on social media, give a review, and tell all of your friends. Until next week, I'm Amber Key.